All right. Well, welcome to another edition of Techno Brew, and today I have the pleasure of hosting Alex Ryals. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Alex is the CISO for MicroAge, and today our topic is deciphering cybersecurity, AI, SASE, and Skillsets. So we're going to run through a number of topics, and we have an ambitious list, as we were kind of talking about this before. So we may not get through everything, but we're going to do our darnest, I think, to cover, I guess, the most salient points, right? So, talking about how AI, SASE, and security frameworks are shaping modern defense strategies, what the biggest blind spots, I guess, are for organizations these days, and the top cybersecurity mistakes companies are making. But before we get into that, Alex, I'd love to, really hear a bit about you, and let people know kind of the path that led you to where you are and how you chose to focus in cybersecurity and eventually lead to your CISO role at MicroAge.
Yeah, I think like most people in the cyberspace, I didn't start in cyber. I usually think of cybersecurity as the culmination of experiences in other areas first. You need to know programming, you need to know networking, you need to know databases, you need to know web design, and then you can sort of tackle cyber because it is the combination of all of them. So I had a fortunate opportunity in my career to work in all those different areas. So the other thing kind of unique about my career is I've worked all four areas of what we call the channel. So the channel ecosystem is you've got customers who buy from resellers, resellers buy from distributors, distributors buy from the vendors who make stuff, right? And everybody gets a markup along the path to the customer. But I've worked at a customer originally right out of school, computer science background, real techie kind of focused programmer. I went to work for FedEx for many years as a system administrator, so hands-on keyboard doing the work. Left there after a couple of years and went to a reseller. So we resold HP software, and I got to wear lots of hats there. I was a billable consultant installing software in big enterprise customers. I was a pre-sale solution architect, writing statements of work and understanding how the business side works. I moved on to software development. I ran a software development team for a while there, which is kind of a sad story. And then ended up as the CTO, helping run the business, which was the kind of that jump from technology hand-on keyboard guy to leadership level. And then from there, we sold the company to a distributor, an IT distributor, and I spent 12 years in distribution. Avnet first. Avnet was bought by Tech Data. Tech Data merged with Cinex to create TD Cinex, and it was
Yeah.
there that I made the transition to security. They wanted to build a cybersecurity practice at Tech Data maybe 10 years ago, and they asked me if I would build that practice for them, and that started my career in cyber, which was fun. I ended up running their global cybersecurity business toward the end. It was about a $4.5 billion business unit where we sold to 20,000 resellers like MicroAge, and
Yeah.
we sold 250 cybersecurity vendor technologies to those resellers. And of course, the resellers sold to the end customer. So it was a lot of fun. I left there and then went to the fourth leg of the stool, which was an ISV, a manufacturer in security. I was the global channel leader for Ping Identity for several years. So customer, reseller, distributor, vendor, and then for this time around, I came back to the reseller community last year to work for MicroAge because I have the most fun when I'm touching the client, helping actually design security solutions and solve real problems. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, and I love that you've got that experience from across various different aisles. I think it's so important because that you can see the perspective from the client, from the manufacturer, from the distributor, and reseller, and really be able. I'm sure that helps you to sort of bridge divides and really get things moving. And I understand you're making big strides at MicroAge, which is fantastic. I also wanted to touch on at Tech Data. You also didn't you establish the first ever cyber range of its kind?
I did. Yeah, that was a fun project. So as a distributor, we were a $60 billion distributor. A lot of people don't even know what distribution is, but our whole point is to provide value to the resellers so that they can resell vendor products to customers. So when I was sitting back trying to think what value can I provide my reseller community at Tech Data, I had this idea to build a space where we could train our resellers on cybersecurity topics, let them actually touch and play with the hardware, and have fun along the way. So we built a cyber range in Phoenix, Arizona. And the idea of the cyber range was a really cool space where vendors could market their products, but we would host events there. So I might have a reseller come in with a bunch of their clients, and we would do an event. A vendor may showcase their technology. We would do a lock pick village, teach people how to pick locks as a sideshow for fun. We would have laptops set around the room, and you could sit down, and we would teach you how to hack something. And when you hack something, the whole room would turn red. I had a light kit on the ceiling, and everything in the room turns red once somebody successfully hacks something. We would have a SOC center in the corner so we could train people on what does it mean to be a SOC analyst? Like,
Yeah.
what's the day-to-day job like? We would hold workshops, an all-day workshop teaching people, how to be a SOC analyst using various SIM solutions. And
Yeah.
it was just a fun space to play and learn, and it was a blast to run. It was an incubation area. We would build new technologies. We would bring in vendors, actually would drop off their tech sometimes and ask my engineers to try to penetrate it like a pen
Yeah.
test. And we would play with it for a couple of weeks, and then usually find some vulnerability and to report. And it was just fun, place to learn and play.
Yeah, for sure. And I love how you touched on a junior SOC analyst because towards the end of our chat, we're going to talk about, I guess what it takes, to get into cybersecurity and what uh, you're looking for sitting in your CISO chair in
Yeah.
potential candidates for, junior SOC analyst roles or a security analyst or a security architect. So I think that's going to be really interesting and of a lot of interest to people watching. So, I mean, we really kind of like set the stage for much of what we're going to talk about. Sort of that penetration testing, and I wonder maybe if we were to kind of like take a step back then and look at maybe the 1,000 foot view.
Mhm.
I guess where what does the cyber threat landscape look like today? What are organizations up against? There's some, and I guess where I'm going is there's a multitude of breaches that have been in the news recently when it comes to Oracle Health and Oracle Cloud,
Yeah.
Twitter, X, and there's probably a variety of different penetration techniques that are being used there. So we're, it's a Pandora's box that I'm opening, and I realize that just to be fair to you.
Well, maybe we can talk about some of the more recent relevant threat vectors,
Sure.
because I think the interesting challenge is, like most areas of IT, cybersecurity is changing faster than ever before, largely accelerated by artificial intelligence and just new programming techniques. And as nation states get more serious and put more money into attacking other countries. So there are countries that fund portions of their military, with active hacking attacks, and so they're very well funded, and that accelerates the speed of change here. So some of the more interesting recent developments are, I think phishing emails remain probably one of the most common attack vectors.
Yeah.
The entry point for most hackers is a phishing email, trying to get you to click a link you shouldn't click, download some malware. But AI has made the phishing emails so much more real. I remember about 6 years ago, roughly, I was at DEF CON in Vegas, and these three guys from the Philippines came over and gave a presentation on how they had used an early form of a large language model, an AI, to write an email, phishing email that was incredibly realistic. And they showed a typical sample of a typical phishing email that was kind of easy to spot, misspellings, etc. And then they showed the one written by their AI engine, and it blew the room away. There were hundreds of people in there, and we were all like, wow, we're entering such a crazy world. Fast forward 6 years, and like any AI model can write phishing emails for you that are super compelling, and it's harder and harder for people to spot them. Polymorphic malware is another good example, which is malware that once you click that link and download the malware to your computer, malware that can change to obfuscate itself as needed in the target environment. So it's not just static code anymore. I mean, this is complicated, advanced code that can pretend to be different things in your network, making it hard to find and spot. Ransomware as a service has accelerated in the last year. You can go out on the dark web and pay just $100 and get access to a ransomware as a service platform, which is a web application where you basically get to choose the malware you wanted to, the ransomware variant you want to use. You go to a separate site to buy a list of email addresses that are potentially compromised, and then you load it into your ransomware as a service tool, and then you go to work. And at the end of the day, you come home from work and you check your dashboard and you see how many people opened the email that you sent. You see how many people clicked the link that you sent. You see how many people actually got infected. And then you sit down and work on the handful of people that actually got encrypted. So it's so automated today that anybody can do it. And that really is changing the threat vector because script kiddies, which is the term we use for people who really don't know how to program well or build malware on their own. They just use other people's stuff. They're much more effective now than they used to be.
Yeah, and they're being enabled. I guess code is being written for them almost in its entirety, right? So it's almost like it's an executable file. And I wonder, because it's really interesting how you're talking about the sophistication level. My wife, she's a professor at a local college here in Toronto, and her IT department sends these regular or infrequent messages to kind of fool her staff. And so
phishing simulations, we call them.
Okay, yeah. So it was her birthday month last month, and they sent her this email saying, "Hey, you've received a birthday card from somebody at the college. Click here for and if she were to click on it, then she'd obviously have fallen for a phishing. Would you say a phishing
simulations?
Phishing simulation, yeah. And then she'd have to she'd have to go into training or whatnot, but is the I guess, are those days numbered? Like, is it going to get to the point where it doesn't matter anymore? Like these phishing simulations has polymorphic phishing, I guess, gotten to the point, or is it getting to the point where these efforts by IT, I guess, are going to be for naught? Like, what's your impression?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't see a horizon for that right now, because this is just a variation of social engineering scam. Social engineering is really probably one of the scariest parts for me as a CISO, because users are always the weakest link in a security chain. I can have amazing technology. I can use AI to spot threats in my network feeds. But at the end of the day, if a user clicks a link in an email, then I'm potentially in trouble. So I think that training users to make them paranoid, as I like to call it, about clicking links is exactly the goal, and that will always be a valuable service. Now, you can also add to that having a good email security product that hopefully checks the URL links in every email before it gets to the mailbox. But that's not a 100% successful approach. That's a largely successful approach. So you always will have a need to train users on how to be secure, including things like don't allow tailgating into your building. It's amazing to me how many companies have employees who walk away from their computer without locking their screen. And especially in a modern open area environment like most office spaces today, people don't have cubicles in offices as much anymore. They're just hotel cubes. And so if you walk away to go to the restroom or go talk to a friend, you leave your computer wide open. If I've tailgated into a building then I can sit down at your computer and get access to the company's secrets. It's so easy. It's just social engineering. So user awareness training and phishing simulations and all these types of things will always be an important part of the equation, I think.
Yeah. And there's so many different, I guess, vulnerabilities or attack fronts that I guess need to be considered. I was just reading this World Economic Forum report on the cybersecurity landscape today, and so there were six major areas. There's like the espionage, IP theft, right? That sort of geopolitical arena, ransomware, as you mentioned, cloud attacks, and then there's that supply chain vulnerability where vendors can be compromised, and you're downloading. I think in one of our past discussions too, you'd even mentioned that about downloading a legitimate say upgrade to a software, and the vendors being completely oblivious to the fact that there was malware embedded in there, right? AI powered threats like the polymorphic, phishing, or even polymorphic extensions, I guess, on your Chrome browser that can steal credentials and can kind of clone different browsing extensions, and just the fact that all these wonderful AI solutions that are available, just adopting those AI solutions, if you're not properly vetting them or you're not doing a proper assessment, can really like leave a door wide open for you. So, you know, um, I was going to ask you, is this why traditional perimeter-based security is kind of falling out of favor?
I don't even know. I don't know that it's fair to say it's falling out of favor, but certainly it's no longer the center stage, right?
Right.
Because to your point, there is so many vectors for threat. So certainly the endpoint is a big one, especially now that we have employees working from home more than ever post COVID. Um, we want to make sure that employees don't get infected laptops that then VPN into the corporate network. So endpoint is always important. Plus, IoT devices out in the field are also still commonly an attack vector. But cloud is another angle, right? To your point a minute ago. In fact, most cloud attacks aren't even necessarily brute force attacks. They're misconfigurations. It is always shocking to me how many companies don't secure their AWS storage buckets or just have misconfiguration in the cloud that an attacker can scan for and find. And that's the attack vector. So most cloud hacking it's not even hacking. It's just taking advantage of poor configuration and administrators who don't know, the systems very well. Other areas, of course, email we talked about. It's coming in through mobile phones. There's so many areas of attack now that this is the reason I think it's so important that most organizations align themselves to a cybersecurity framework, like the NIST cybersecurity framework in lieu of anything else. If you're healthcare, obviously you're going to be looking at HIPAA. If you're in the retail industry, you're looking at PCI DSS. If you're working with the DoD, you're looking at NIST 800-53 or 171. So these frameworks will make you think about all those attack vectors and have security in place for all the pieces, because it's so hard to remember and keep track. There's so many ways that bad guys can come in. So a framework will give you a methodical approach to designing a security solution.
Right. And within that framework, I guess you've got a number of different tools as well. You've got SASE, you've got NDR,
Yeah.
bot mitigation, DDoS mitigation. Um, I suppose like for an enterprise, perhaps it's a lot. You've got the resources to be able to address that and mitigate. But what if you're like a small business or a medium business, then where you might be feeling a bit out of your depth and wondering, is this something that I need to adhere to? Um, what do you say to that?
Yeah, for an SMB or mid-sized customer who doesn't have the budget of an enterprise customer, I say if you're doing the basics, you're going to likely be okay. What are the basics? Well, for sure, you want to keep up with patching because vendors patch known vulnerabilities, right? So we know that out of all the vulnerabilities out there, there's only about 2% that are actually being exploited by a bad guy with an exploit. But you don't know which 2% of the vulnerabilities to care about generally. So patching is super important, right? So keep up your patching. Number two, take backups. Store the backups in either immutable storage that can't be changed so that ransomware can't impact it. But if you're hit by ransomware, you want to have a way to recover. Make sure that you're doing regular backups and you're thinking about how to secure those backups so they're not also infected. You're going to want to have multi-factor authentication on all of your identity and access so that if a bad guy gets access to your passwords, it doesn't help him any because he needs multi-factor authentication. Maybe it's a code text to your phone, or maybe it's an authenticator. So you have to have an endpoint agent on all your laptops. You need an EDR solution so that those laptops are forwarding a message back to some console telling somebody if there's an issue identified. If you're doing the basics, which doesn't cost a tremendous amount of budget, then an SMB client is likely going to be okay. Whenever you get into some more advanced things like data security, making sure you classify your data so that when you turn on your Copilot, it's not going to discover things in your data that it shouldn't, or bot mitigation or DDoS mitigation, network detection and response. These more advanced concepts are certainly another phase to focus on. But I like to lay things out in phases for our customers. Think about the things you must do. Like another one on the must-do list is email security. That 80% of malware comes in through email. So you must have an email security solution like Proofpoint or Mimecast or something like that. So do the basics, and then I like to lay out a phase 2 and a phase 3 on different things to focus on as you get the budget and have the time.
Right. And I guess that's you have to take that methodical and sort of mindful approach to this. Otherwise, you're kind of you're already off on the wrong foot. I wanted to go back to one of the subtopics of our discussion, which was SASE, and you had mentioned sort of like all these edge devices, cell phones, laptops, outside of the network, the corporate network, and a secured area, let's say, or local access network. Maybe you could kind of describe, I guess, the role of SASE. What is it? Why is it such an appeal then for edge networks, and why is it part of the modern cybersecurity defense strategy in your opinion?
Yeah. So let's talk about what it is first. So SASE, SASE, stands for Secure Access Service Edge. It's a term coined by Gartner years ago. And the idea of it is pretty simple. There's two parts to SASE, two ingredients. One is a networking component, and the other is a security services component. So let's talk about the networking side first. The network side of SASE is the idea that I can have an SD-WAN network connectivity run by someone else in the cloud that can get my data for an endpoint. Like, let's say I work at home. My network traffic can go through a private SASE cloud run by some third-party vendor like Cato Networks or Fortinet with FortiSASE, or Netscope, or Palo Alto Prisma Access. Those are examples of SASE solutions, Zscaler. So I connect to a private cloud. That private cloud has high-speed SD-WAN encrypted links across the network back to either a cloud service like maybe Microsoft M365, or maybe Concur, or maybe Salesforce.com, or it can take me back to my data center location. So that's the networking component. And they're highly resilient links with duplicate paths and all those fun things. The second part is security services. So the traditional way that we would provide service for endpoint devices, like let's say I'm working out of my house and I want to access corporate network, typically I would have to have a VPN client on my laptop. I would create a virtual private network from my laptop back to my data center where all my data is. The problem with VPN connectivity is, depending on where you are around the world, I have to backhaul all of my traffic across the internet back to my corporate data center. And from there, I would go through the firewall because that's where my firewall is, or my secure web gateway, my data loss prevention technology. And then it might pivot me back out to the internet to go access a website. And that's a lot of latency for me to travel. If I'm on the East Coast and my data center's on the West Coast, I have to VPN all the way back to the West Coast just to go through my security services and pivot back to the internet. So what SASE does is, let's take an example. Like Cato Networks is a great example. Cato has a couple of hundred points of presence, POPs, around the world. And each POP is a data center, and they might be piggybacking on a Amazon or AWS data center. Maybe it's a colo from some local colos. There might be a couple of hundred of these guys, and Cato is positioned their firewalls in each one, their secure web gateways, their DLP or data loss prevention applications, their CASB, cloud access security broker software, their ZTNA, zero trust network access capability, and their remote browser isolation, RBI data. All of that, those firewall services or security services are in every one of the couple of hundred POPs, points of presence around the world. So if I'm sitting at home and I live in Birmingham, Alabama, and I turn on my SASE agent, it would connect to the nearest POP to wherever I'm at and go through all the security services there locally. So for me, it would probably be Atlanta. And then it could pivot me straight out to the internet to my Microsoft 365, or it could jump me across the country to our data center, which is in Phoenix. So the point is you're moving all the security services from your corporate data center out to be close to your users wherever they are.
Right.
So for largely remote environments like we are today, SASE provides high-speed bandwidth and network connectivity to security services that are near your user community so that you can more quickly identify threat and isolate threat on the network. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're talking about speed and efficiency. You're not clogging up a pipe basically, like I imagine the VPN would be, like with
Yeah.
redundant data streams going back and forth unnecessarily, when you can go locally, I guess, for your access.
Right.
Yeah. So is that a solution then that uh, probably for an SMB client then, or a small business client, probably uh, not necessarily required. If you're doing those basic things like you were saying before, you should be pretty good. You're saying this is more like for those, like even like a workforce like yourself. Your whole team, your Salesforce team, is entirely remote. So is this something you would consider for them as opposed to VPN then?
Yeah, I don't know that SASE is a good fit for most SMB clients because the cost, it's made for larger organizations that have distributed networks, distributed users. But if you're a mid-sized customer, and especially if you have a lot of remote employees or lots of different remote sites for your business, remote locations, then SASE absolutely can provide a lot of value. Number one of which is you don't have to manage firewalls and security appliances anymore. You're basically using cloud-based security services. You don't have to upgrade the firewalls, refresh them, manage them. All you do is go to one web console and configure your policies, and you push it out, and it auto pushes to all the different points of presence, the POPs, and configures all the firewall and security services in all the different locations. So when it's time to refresh that Palo Alto firewall, you don't have to do it. It's managed by your cloud provider, whoever you pick for your SASE service.
Right. Okay. Well, it's good to know. I mean, honestly, for a relative layperson like myself, um, this foray into the cybersecurity world, and the way it's changed so rapidly in the last few years, and the solutions that have come to bear recently. For me, it's been a really informative journey, and something I've been really excited about talking to you about. So I really appreciate you. Uh, I guess explaining it in a way that is kind of a unique ability of yours. I was watching your cyber bites. You have this the great way of sort of like delivering, complex, seemingly abstract ideas that in a way that is highly discernible and consumable. And for somebody like me, that's exactly what I need.
Well, I appreciate that. That's certainly my goal. I want to decipher cybersecurity in a way and make it understandable as best that I can. Some of these concepts are complicated. Like we haven't even tried to get into what exactly is DLP or CASB or ZTNA. Some of
Yeah.
these concepts are complicated, right? So anytime I can simplify is helpful for me and our customers for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to touch on something you had mentioned about SASE in a previous conversation, and it's from a security governance perspective. You had mentioned that uh, SOC 2 compliance and the appeal of, I guess, liability reduction from an insurance perspective. And
Yeah.
because there are some sobering realities about cybersecurity insurance. And so, how does SASE help to mitigate those risks? And what's that benefit point that perhaps people need to know about, organizations
That's
need
a
to know about?
That's a great question and a good topic. So, one of the things I teach my sales team when we're talking to customers is try to understand a customer's motivation for buying whatever security they're trying to acquire, whether it's SASE or firewalls or whatever. And some people's motivation is I'm trying to get some cybersecurity insurance, and the insurance provider is requiring that I buy certain things, right? And that's a motivation. Another motivation is, we have a HIPAA audit coming up, and we're a healthcare provider, and so I need this security products to pass my HIPAA audit. Or maybe their CISO has told them they have to be compliant with SOC 2 or with the NIST cybersecurity framework, and they're just trying to check off boxes to comply with an audit. So one of the things that I think SASE does well is it can check off several different boxes for clients for various types of regulation or even for cybersecurity insurance. And every insurance provider has slightly different requirements on what they need, and they're rarely very specific on, they're not going to tell you what vendor technology you need to go with or
Sure.
anything like that, but they will say you need EDR, you need endpoint detection and response agents deployed to all of your servers and laptops, right? And so what SASE can do for you is, depending on the vendor you go with, to be clear, sometimes you need a separate EDR agent from a SASE agent, and some SASE providers are starting to have their agent be a rough replacement for an EDR agent. We're getting there with some of them. But however you do it, a SASE agent is going to enforce a couple of things that are generally security controls for SOC 2 or the NIST cybersecurity framework. Things like encrypting local hard drives or checking to make sure that certain policies are turned on a laptop, like the screen will time out and require a relogin after no activity for a certain number of minutes. Things that Microsoft Intune might do. Some SASE agents are measuring against whatever policies are on a device. Certainly encrypting connectivity, network connectivity in transit as you connect from an endpoint device back to a corporate network or even to the cloud. That encryption is happening with the SASE agent, and that's usually a requirement. And encryption at rest or encryption in transit is a requirement for a lot of frameworks, security frameworks, or even cyber insurance, depending on the insurance provider. The other big one is a lot of insurance providers want you to have a SOC service, an MDR, managed detection and response. So that is an endpoint agent and a network agent and your email security, all your events going into one location to be monitored by a SOC team, a security operations center team. So some SASE providers like Cato Networks, they have a managed detection response offering built in. So they will monitor your network and everything for you as a managed service. Other SASE providers come with the console and all the events and things that can feed into your own SOC. If you have your own SOC and you're using whatever SIM solution you use, whether that's Microsoft Sentinel or maybe it's Splunk or Sumo Logic, whatever you're using, you can forward events into it. So SASE has a good way of checking a lot of boxes to apply to frameworks and also to help you with cyber insurance. But mileage may vary, right? So make sure you're looking at your insurance provider's requirements, and then be clear on the SASE provider you're talking to and what capability they provide.
Right. And you mentioned something, because managed services is something you guys do very well at MicroAge, and so I wonder if one day we're going to see a cybersecurity managed service portfolio where perhaps you certainly have the expertise and the know-how, and you've got the chops for it. So maybe that's something that is coming down the pipe, or something you guys are toying with, because it seems to be coming up across the board, right? Not just from the
Yeah,
vendors, but
we've seen a really large increase lately in the last year and a half with customers who are wanting to outsource their SOC services. I mean, it's hard to find good security people. I think last I read, there's close to 2.5 million open job positions globally in
yeah.
cybersecurity, almost 900,000 just in the US. So finding a good cyber person is super hard to do. And so customers are um, outsourcing that function to an MDR provider like MicroAge. So we have a managed service called CyberPoint. It comes in three levels. The first level is a basic SOC service. So we deploy endpoint agents out to your endpoints, and they report information back to a SOC that's 24/7 managed, and we'll identify threat. We can take in events from your network and from your email servers and your backup system and your endpoint devices and your cloud environment, and we correlate all this data together and try to identify threat, and then work with you to remediate if there's ever an incident. Then we add on to that different other managed services, like we can manage your email user awareness training. That when you train your users on best practices around security,
Right.
we can manage your email security. We can manage those phishing simulations that we talked about earlier. We'll build those simulations for you and send them out to your employees. So managed services are becoming really popular because clients are just really struggling to find the right people to build that kind of capability in house, especially in the SMB and mid-market space.
I wonder. Um, I guess in response to, I guess as a component of your managed services portfolio, then from a cybersecurity perspective, and in response to like all these AI powered threats that we kind of went through, um, I guess how do AI powered security tools fit into I guess a component of the service that you provide, and how do you view them, like this question, and I hate to sound like a cliche, but whether or not they are co-pilots for human analysts, or are they going to kind of like take are they going to be kind of running autonomously in the background? What's your view on that?
Honestly, I think it's going to shake out to be some of both, right? Because certainly Gen AI is adding automation that we have never had access to before. And I'll give a couple examples here in a second. Um, but at the same time, you oftentimes need humans to make some final decisions on whether to kick off automation sometimes, and certainly to make higher level decisions. So some of what we're seeing Gen AI do for us is like take a SIM solution, security, information, and event management. That's that 24/7 console that you see on TV and all the
Yeah.
spy shows, where you got all the operators sitting around watching a console with all these events streaming by. It collects events from all over a company about security from all your systems, your network and your servers and your databases, et cetera. Well, now we can use natural language processing to query for information. Used to, we had to look at the events and hope the system correlated them to a root cause event. But now we can actually type into the window and say something like, are there any devices on my network that are not known and registered with the system? In other words, rogue devices. And it'll come back and give you a list of several IP addresses that you can't identify, devices that we haven't registered their MAC address. So they're unknown devices on my network. But you just ask for it using a normal sentence, right? So that kind of thing is new. It's helping SOC operators be more efficient. Another good example is like EDR agents, endpoint detection and response agents. Think about what we used to call malware antivirus agents. Um, those things on an endpoint device now are watching all the behavior of how you act on a device. So if you ever act not like yourself, then it
Wow.
can detect that kind of thing, right? And that's pretty amazing. Identity and access management solutions from like Ping Identity or Okta, they can detect when bots are trying to log into your website versus a human by doing things like looking at mouse movements, on the screen as you move a mouse around. They can
Right.
detect if it's machine driven or human driven. So when it comes to email, we already talked about how with email we can, using AI, not only write malicious emails very natural language, but we can also better detect machine written emails versus human written emails, which is important in an email security solution. So I think that there's a lot of really cool things that AI is doing to enhance the information giving to the human to make decisions in a SOC environment.
Yeah, it's actually it's kind of astounding. And thanks for sharing that with me because it really gives some new scope and context, certainly for me. Um, and I guess recognizing that we've got probably about 18 minutes left. I wonder if we could maybe shift gears a little bit
Yeah.
and talk about that human component. Where we had mentioned we would take a look at what it takes to be competitive in the cybersecurity job market today, and what you might be looking for from your seat when it comes to selecting individuals. And uh, you know, I don't know if we have time to talk about all these three, all three of these: the junior SOC analyst, the security architects, security analyst. But where would you like to start? Maybe the junior SOC. For somebody who's just kind of getting into cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think there's several directions we could take here. So I'll tell you, let's talk first about what I'm looking for in a
Great.
person to hire in the security market, and then we'll talk about some of the positions that you can hire into and what starting role looks like or advanced
I
roles.
love it.
Um, some of the things I look for is I'm looking for someone who is curious and inquisitive and never satisfied with how things work. I want to find people who just have that, they just want to know how everything works. One of my favorite interview questions, actually, when I'm chatting with people in security and trying to interview, is tell me about a technology project you're doing at your house.
Okay.
Um, because that one takes people off guard because it really didn't have anything to do with the job I'm hiring for to be a SOC analyst, as an example.
Yeah.
But here's what I'm looking for, and I usually throw out a couple of examples. I want to know that they own a Raspberry Pi. Like if you don't own a Pi or an Arduino board, then you're gonna be hard pressed to convince me you're really ready for cybersecurity because most people I know in the security industry have bought a Pi and done something with it. You might load Kali Linux on it just to play with Kali. It's the cheapest way to get a computer to play with. You might have turned it into a sprinkler system management device. Um, have you built your own computer before at your house to figure out how it works? And how do you pick the right video card that's compatible with the right motherboard? Have you automated something like your lights in your house? I don't care what the project is, but
Right.
if they're not the type person that has been curious, hey, I wonder if I can make this work, or had a desire to learn Linux, and so they went and took an old laptop and installed Ubuntu on it and tried to play around and learn Linux commands. I just want to know that this isn't just a job; it's a career, right?
Yeah.
Because security is not like learning how to deploy a Cisco network switch. Um, it requires a combination of a lot of knowledge. I think we mentioned this at the beginning, but to be good at security, you need to be a programmer. You need to know databases. You need to know network configuration and understand network segmentation. You need to probably have done some web development, if nothing else, but just JavaScript. Um, and and then you start playing around with security because it is the combination of all of it, because a hacker uses all of those skills. to do what they do. So when we talk about what should I do if I want to get into the security industry, what I usually tell people, and I mentor a lot of young people, they have, of course, there are curriculum in school where you can come out with a cybersecurity degree, and they will, in their courseware, cover all those topics I just mentioned. But you want to probably go after a basic certification in the beginning, like maybe CompTIA's Security Plus. Now, Security Plus does require a combination of a lot of knowledge. So maybe you need to back off and start with Network Plus first, possibly, or A Plus. A Plus learns all about servers. Network Plus, you learn all about networking. Cloud Plus, you learn all about cloud computing. And then you take the Security Plus test, which is a bit of combination of all that knowledge. But I usually tell people that's probably one of the first things to look at for a lot of positions, like a SOC analyst, because you're not a programmer, you're not having to design solutions yet, but you need a casual understanding of all the topics. Security Plus is not super technical, it's more a lot of conceptual knowledge. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah.
So if we were to talk about the levels, I think you mentioned, what was it, junior SOC analyst, SOC security analyst, and architect? Were those the three?
Yeah, and those are just three that we kind of toyed with earlier in an earlier conversation. But I love where you're going with this. So please, whatever path you think is best, I'm with you, man. Let's go.
So let's talk about some of the job opportunities in cybersecurity, and I'll expand it a little beyond just those three. So when I think about the opportunities for people coming out of the military with maybe a background in intelligence, or coming out of school, or maybe you're pivoting from another career, there's a couple of areas you could start from. Number one, a SOC analyst is a good area to start from. A SOC analyst stands for Security Operations Center Analyst. So a SOC, like I said before, is that 24/7 operation with all those big screens and all the events scrolling across. And what a SOC analyst does is they look at the tool. It's called a SIEM tool, SIEM, Security Information and Event Management. They look at the tool, and it has an event that says, hey, this particular laptop looks like they got malware. So what are you going to do? Well, you run a playbook, a run book, that you might go isolate that device off the network, then reach out to that user. Maybe you take steps to go rebuild that computer. So a SOC analyst is identifying threat and then responding with some type of automation or manual intervention or recovery activity. So that's a fun entry-level job, because the type of company you would hire on with is called an MSSP, a Managed Security Service Provider. Wow, we need to have a survey, a quiz, or a game show about acronyms in cybersecurity.
Yes, me too.
So an MSSP, a Managed Security Service Provider, they're the ones who a company would outsource their security to. Like we talked earlier about outsourcing your SOC service. Like MicroAge, we have an outsourced SOC called CyberPoint, and customers outsource to us. We are an MSSP. So anybody who has a SOC and they're monitoring events from lots of customers, they always need SOC analysts. So it's a great entry-level position to start learning the lingo, learning the industry. And from there, you can move your way up into an analyst, which is a little higher end. Maybe you start supporting more products, more technologies. Maybe you become a manager and run the SOC. Those are all good opportunities. Another path some people take is a penetration tester. So we also call these ethical hackers.
Right.
So there are companies like MicroAge. We sell a lot of pen testing projects. Companies come to us, and cyber insurance requires that at least once a year that you have a pen test. So you hire a company like MicroAge, and we come out with a pen tester, and we will try to hack your environment. And when we hack in, which we usually do, we'll write a report and tell you how we got in, and then you can go fix those things. So that is a very popular job. It's fun. It's very technical. You're going to need to know Linux. You're going to need to be a programmer. You need to know databases. You're going to need to know networking very well. So I would say that most people who are pen testers, IT these things are their hobby. Like they've been playing around on computers since they were 15, and they just love technology. And they've learned several programming languages all on their own, out of their house. And they have a Linux box since they were 16 years old. And those kinds of people, they're going to make great pen testers. Another good opportunity, and this is one people don't think about a whole lot, there are companies like MicroAge that are resellers of security products. So we resell, I think last year I sold 75 different security vendors to our customers to solve various problems. My team that works for me as security architects, we actually don't have to know the products to the level of installation and implementation. We just know it to the conceptual level of what they do so that we can help a sales rep come alongside and sell technology to a client. So we go talk to a client, hear their business problem, and then recommend the right security solution. So becoming familiar and knowledgeable with security vendor technology from Checkpoint or Palo Alto or Cater Networks or Mimecast or whoever is a whole discipline. And you're typically paid a base plus a commission based on how much you sell with the sales rep and how many deals you close. So that's a whole discipline. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't require you to be incredibly technical. You're not programming. You don't have to configure networks, but you need to pass probably a Security Plus test. So you prove that you understand the concepts of security. That's a lot of fun. And then the next one is a leadership position. Roles like mine where you lead security teams. Certainly, it helps to be technical, but not everyone in leadership of a security team is technical. So taking a leadership path is another option. Generally, leadership thinks more about governance, risk, and compliance as an area of security. There are certifications you can get on GRC. So this is thinking about what are the risks a company faces, like a risk they might get a zero-day attack. And then how would you mitigate that risk? And tracking all that information. Those are the types of things a security leader would focus and think about, less about how to configure the firewall. It's more about let's negotiate a good deal to pick the right firewall vendor and then get a good deal on it. So leadership in security, architects that sell security products on the market, and then pen testers and SOC analysts are all good career paths. And if you want to learn more about these paths, one of the best websites I would point you to is called cybrary.it. Cybrary, cybrary.it. It's largely a free set of security specific training. They've broken all the training courses up by tracks. So by career path, if you want to be a pen tester, there's a whole list of training you can take for that. If you want to be a security SOC analyst, there's a whole list of training for that. And most of it's free. You can sign up for an account and get some more advanced training that gives you access to actual lab environments where you can touch and play with the product. That has a cost, but I've done a lot of my personal learning on Cybrary with no cost. It's an amazing resource. If you're not using it today, I would highly encourage you to check it out.
Cybrary.it. That's a good get. Thanks. Yeah, well, I mean, thank you for that. That's a lot. I mean, that was very succinct and very clear in terms of like pathways to success, I guess, in cybersecurity, starting from that that junior SOC analyst to pen testing to technical sales architects, and then eventually leadership if that's the route you want to take. We've got 4 minutes left, and I wanted to, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for joining us. It's been such a pleasure, and it's every time I have a conversation with you, I come away with so much and so much value, and it's just a real pleasure to speak with you. So thank you for that. But I wanted to know, like, is there anything that you wanted to leave the audience with? Something you know that perhaps we haven't talked about, or something that maybe was something you wanted to bring up and we haven't had a chance to organically in the conversation. So
Yeah, first, I guess I'll address one of the comments that I see in the window here, which the question around how does small bootstrap tech startups, with teams under 10, what should their priorities be for security? And it's a great question. And we sort of mentioned it earlier, but the basics are what I call them. If you're a small bootstrap, you're under 10 employees, make sure you have an endpoint security agent on all your endpoint laptops, right? Make sure you have an email security solution. And I would even go as far as to say, don't just rely on Microsoft 365 for email security. Invest in something like Mimecast or Proofpoint or Abnormal Security or something like that. You're definitely going to want to have, let me think, I'm losing my train of thought. So email security, endpoint security. You're going to want to think about making sure your IT team is having good firewall technology, because that's an easy kind of no-brainer basic. Look at a cybersecurity framework, like the NIST cybersecurity framework is probably the best agnostic framework to use. It doesn't require an audit. It will list out all the areas of security you want to have covered. That's probably the best source of what you want to focus on. Multi-factor authentication. You must have a good, solid identity solution. I think identity is the foundation of all cybersecurity. So if you do nothing else, make sure your identity solution is good. And you can use something, if you're a Microsoft shop, you can certainly go with an Entra ID or on-prem Active Directory, but put a lot of thought into that. Make sure MFA is turned on. Going with a third-party provider like Ping or Okta adds a lot of value and benefit for sure in capability and automation. But identity is probably one of the most important steps you can take for security.
Great.
Backup.
Thanks for that question, Alexia.
Yeah.
Great question from Alexia at the 11th hour.
And if there's any questions or you guys want some help with any of the things we've talked about, you can reach out to us at microage.com. At the top right corner is a big red button called Talk to an Expert. You can fill that out and request some help. We'd love to help you with any of these topics we've talked about. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Alex Ryals, and I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And your information is front and center there. So thanks. And any parting thoughts? What do you want to leave us with? Your words of wisdom.
Yeah, I would just say take security seriously. I talk to a lot of customers who say, well, I'm not a target. I make furniture for a living, right? No one cares about me. Russia's not going to attack me. But it doesn't work that way. Most hacking is automated. There are bots online that scan for easy targets. And unfortunately, SMB and mid-market clients are usually easy targets because they don't have the budget to secure all the vectors of threat in an organization, like your firewalls and your endpoints and your mobile devices and your IoT devices. And there's so many things to secure. SMB customers are usually vulnerable. So take it seriously. Make sure that you're doing a pen test at least once a year. Pay a company to try to attack you like a hacker would. They will tell you where your vulnerabilities are. And then that year's budget, spend some time improving one thing, that you can do for this year. And then next year, do it again and improve the next thing. So if you're limited on budget, just make forward progress. That's my only thing. Don't just sit still and do nothing every year, because it will catch up with you, and breaches can be in the millions in terms of impact. So it's definitely worth it to take it seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's really, I think that's a perfect note to leave this conversation on. So Alex, thank you once again for joining us as a guest. It's been an utter pleasure, and really thoroughly enjoyed it.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to join you, Carlos. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex.